Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Interview. I'm Jennifer Duke. We might already be into September, but I reckon it's a safe bet that plenty of businesses are yet to finalise their tax for the last financial year. Unsurprisingly, research from accounting software company Intuit QuickBooks suggests that almost 1 in 3 small and medium-sized businesses consider tax time one of the most stressful times of the year. So I wanted to do something a little bit different today. I'm joined by not one, but 2 guests. Damien Greathead is accountant and advisor lead at Intuit QuickBooks Australia, a supporter of this podcast. Damien, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Wonderful to be here, Jennifer. Thank you.
And our other guest started out as an accountant before finding huge success as a comedian, radio presenter, and more. You've probably heard of him, Anthony Limo Lehman. Good morning.
Jen, it is a pleasure to be here. And dare I say it, long-time listener, first-time guest. I'm very excited.
So before we get to tax time, I really have to know, how did you go from 10 years as a chartered accountant to becoming a successful comedian? How does a transition like that ever happen?
Yeah, well, it certainly didn't happen overnight, but I was a chartered accountant for 10 years. I say from 1991 to 1997. A little maths joke there for you, Jen. But it was from 1991 to 2001, and I did stand-up comedy at the same time for 7 of those years. So it was a very slow transition from accounting into comedy. I didn't sort of wake up one morning and go, you know what? I might have a crack at jokes. But because I'm an accountant and I'm very conservative, it took me a long time to quit my day job. You know, I really had to make sure I was in a position to have a crack at this career. Whereas most comedians I know just go, they throw in their day job at the drop of a hat and focus on comedy. But I really took my time with it.
Well, it's probably pretty good that you did, because I believe that one of your comedy shows is called Taxing Lyrical. So you obviously got a lot of material from the accounting industry that helped. What do you think it was about accounting that gave you so much humour?
You know what? One of the things that I really tapped into in that show is the lack of respect that I think accounting gets from people. People say accountants are boring, which I completely disagree with. I think accountants aren't boring, and I blame Monty Python for that. I think Monty Python's characterization of accountants back in the 60s and 70s led people to this conclusion that accountants are boring. And I don't think that's the case. I just think accountants need better publicity, Jen. I think accountants need their own TV show, which, believe it or not, we don't have. I mean, there are TV shows for vets and doctors and lawyers. Even ice road truckers get a TV show. I think accountants should have a TV show and some working titles for the TV show. Bondi Accountant could work. Accountant Wants a Wife. That's another option. Or So You Think You Can Add. I reckon that could work as well. So we just need better publicity. So it was the divergence between my view of accountants and the general public's view of accountants was my main focus in that particular show. And I told a few stories from my time as an accountant.
Well, maybe Damien will bring you in a little bit here with some of your stories in the accounting landscape. Where are most SMEs up to in terms of their tax process right now? We're in September. Have they wrapped up FY23, or are we still working through it all?
Oh, Jennifer, I think people are only, those SMEs, they're just getting started on their tax processes. I think the simplest tax returns, and in terms of a pay-as-you-go type client, they've probably filed themselves. But any of those folks with a slightly complicated return, such as having a business, they're probably still deep in the process of still getting their documents together, getting everything in order, and getting a complete set of records over to their accountant. I think that is one of the big challenges in the accounting industry is these time deadlines and this squeezing of time as accountants sit there waiting for their clients to get the data into them so that they can get to work doing what they do best, which is processing that data and then finding ways in which they can minimize the tax liability for their clients.
Definitely. And what are some of those kind of bigger mistakes that you're seeing SMEs making right now?
Oh, well, I think one of the biggest mistakes that we see is that people just aren't organised. I think a lot of people leave their tax responsibilities until the last minute, and a whole lot of that stress. And there's as many as 30% of the population procrastinates and holds off because they don't really understand the process associated with the year-end tax. But one of the key things that we found is that just being organized throughout the course of the year, collecting information throughout the course of the year, using technology to do that, means that come tax time, everything's at your fingertips, everything can be sent to your accountant with a click of a button, and that actually alleviates an enormous amount of stress for the SME business owner.
I feel like that needs to be all of our tax New Year's resolutions. Is start using the technology properly and get on top of it all.
Well, it's the funny thing. It's the apps that are out there, and QuickBooks has a great mobile app, obviously, which you can snap pictures of your receipts, invoice on the go. So there's no real reason that we should be doing our accounting or bookkeeping at the weekends or in the evenings. It should be on the go if we enable that technology to do exactly that.
Stay with me. We'll be back in a minute. My guests today are Aussie comedian Anthony Limo Lehman and Damien Greathead from Intuit QuickBooks Australia. So let's look at setting up better for the year ahead, as we were talking about. It's not too late right now if you haven't done all those things and you're sort of staring down the barrel right now of how do you get back on top of it? What's your best advice?
Best advice, if you're not talking to an accountant or bookkeeper, it's definitely worth the investment. They can help you identify the right tools for your business from an accounting perspective. So I think my number one piece of advice, if you don't have a good advisor in that accounting and bookkeeping space, find one, because they will help you get set up now, which will allow you to track everything throughout the course of the year and actually probably give you a whole bunch more value and a whole lot more insights into what's actually happening in your business. Interestingly, out of the research, 1 in 3 were stressed by tax season, but as much as 25% weren't concerned about tax time because they were connected to an accountant.
So we are only 8 weeks in. So you're basically saying, no one panic. It's okay. It's not too late. You can still fix this if it's a mess, right? Like that is the takeaway.
Yes, absolutely, Jennifer. I think there's plenty of time to get on track for the new financial year. Obviously, if we're reaching into the glove box and the shoe box to get last year's receipts and whatnot, there's not much we can do about that now, but we can certainly focus on the new financial year.
So Limo, is it hard to motivate people once the pressure of tax time has passed? It's kind of like that New Year's resolution that I was talking about. Everyone says they're going to do better. And then 8 weeks later, you're like putting your receipts back in the shoebox.
Yeah, exactly. And QuickBooks has done some great research asking people about the stress of tax time. And here's some interesting numbers for you, Jen. 17% of people have said they would rather sit in the middle seat of a long-haul flight than do their tax return. Now, that is saying something. If you've ever sat in the middle seat of a long-haul flight, I can't sit in the middle seat of a Melbourne-Sydney flight, let alone a long-haul flight.
Or a train.
Yeah, 18% would rather make small talk with an unpleasant neighbour than do their taxes. And 1 in 5 Aussies would rather pick up dog poo than complete a tax return, which I am very happy to pick up my own dog's poo. It's other dogs' poo that I have an issue with. So it causes a lot of stress for people. And we kind of picked up on this in the series of sketches that I did with the QuickBooks team. And if you put it off for the whole year, you're courting a very stressful end of financial year. Just to be on top of your financial situation it's actually empowering. And I know with myself, once I finish my tax, I have a deep sense of satisfaction. Instead of sitting in the middle seat, it's like being upgraded to business class, Jen. That's the joy I feel.
There needs to be a carrot like dangled at the end of the tax process, like a box of chocolates that waits for you right after you've done it.
Yeah, see, I try and tell people, but to me, I say, because comedians are notoriously bad when it comes to doing their taxes. I know one in particular, he didn't do a tax return for 8 years.
Ooh.
Okay. And it was quite a successful period in that guy's career. And when he eventually got around to catching up on it all, it was a very expensive and stressful time for him. And you just can't let it go. But I say to certainly my comedy friends, and this applies to all SMEs, if you get on top of it and you do it, as I said, the sense of satisfaction from being on top of your financial situation is worth more than any carrot you can dangle at the end of it, because it allows you, even if your financial situation is not great, it enables you to plan for the future.
That's a great point. It's a really great point. And Damien, Intuit has a lot of data at its disposal. What does it tell us overall about those benefits of a small business working with an accountant or bookkeeper and that sort of digging your way out of a situation and that future planning?
Yeah, a couple of really interesting data points, Jennifer. First one being that stress that I mentioned earlier. So 25% of Australians that don't find the end of year tax process stressful, they're connected to an accountant and bookkeeper. We know the job satisfaction and business satisfaction as much as 3 times higher for those business owners that are connected with a really great accountant or bookkeeper. And also we know that the likelihood of success, so the survival rates of small businesses beyond 5 years, those survival rates triple when you are connected with an accountant or bookkeeper. A lot of people think I'm a startup, and I can't afford an accountant or bookkeeper, but I would actually say that you can't afford not to have an accountant or bookkeeper, particularly in those early days, to make sure that you're set up correctly, to make sure you got the right tools in place, to make sure your cash flow is in a really great position, because you might have great profits, but if you don't have cash flow coming into the business, that's incredibly stressful as well. So survival rates, threefold beyond that 5-year mark when you're connected to an accountant or bookkeeper. So ask your friends, ask your colleagues or your local network who they go to for their accountant and bookkeeping, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you get set up for success.
Damien and Limo, thank you both so much for talking to Fear and Greed.
An absolute pleasure, Jen. Thank you for having us on.
Jennifer, thank you so much. Big fan of the podcast as well. And Limo, love your work. Thank you so much.
That was comedian and former accountant Anthony Limo Lehman and Damien Greathead, accountant and advisor lead at Intuit QuickBooks Australia, which is a supporter of this podcast. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's best business podcast. I'm Jennifer Duke, economics correspondent for Capital Brief and filling in for Sean Elmer. Have a great day.